an appraiser is competent, and then an appraiser is impartial, independent, and objective. So the use of the word impartial comes right from USPAP's definition of an appraiser. And then it says unbiased.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And welcome, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with you in the podcast chair. Got an exciting episode for you today. I want to remind you, of course, that we are sponsored by three great companies that I use every day of my life as an appraiser. First of all, Working RE Magazine. Yeah, every day, pretty much every day, I get an email from Working RE. Sometimes I click on them, sometimes I don't. You should be signed up, at least for their free email, to find out what's going on in the appraisal profession. Go to workingre.com. Again, it's Working REs and workingrealestate.com. Every day of my life, I'm using a la mode. A la mode software is what allows me to do more with less, to be able to work smarter, not harder. You can check them out and find out why they are the top appraisal software in the world. Go to alamode.com or call them at 800-ALA-MODE. And finally, we are sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster, of course, is coming up with DataMaster 6 very, very soon. Go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach for more information. One more time, that's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Well, folks, you've probably heard that upcoming, we have got a wonderful webinar. This will be on February 19th and the 26th, where we are going to be tackling these desktop products, alternative valuation. Sometimes they're referred to hybrids. I know that's a naughty word in the appraisal profession these days. And we're going to tackle what these things are. Should they be a part of an appraiser's business model? And if so, how to structure your model in such a way that it will work properly and appropriately. One of the participants in that great webinar is going to be Mr. Tim Andersen. Tim joins me today. Tim, welcome to the program again, my friend.
Dustin, thank you. I appreciate it. It is, as always, it is good to talk to you. And as always, my best to your family.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I always appreciate you taking the time. Let me set this up, Tim. You and I are getting ready for this upcoming webinar. By the way, folks, if you're interested in that webinar, you can go to theappraisercoach.com. Just click on the webinar for alternative valuations. And by the way, we're offering a 10% discount for podcast listeners. Just at the checkout, when you go to the coupon code section, just type in 10- or hyphen 10-off. 10-off will give you 10% off of that. It is a two-part webinar. Starts on February 19th and continues the next week, which is when Tim will be leading the discussion on the 26th. And Tim, the reason we're meeting today is we are putting together a handout for that particular webinar. And really the basic gist or the idea of the handout is going to be to give appraisers a reference. What is it that needs to be in every appraisal, whether it be an alternative valuation, a hybrid, a desktop, or a URAR 1004 UAD? What is it that has to be in each and every single one of those reports? And as we're putting together that handout, we got to this thing called the certification. Tim, what's a certification?
Dustin, in the case of USPAP, the certification is Standard Rule 2-3. And basically what the certification does in so many words is it says, I have told the truth, I have told the truth, I have told the truth, and I have told the truth. And I have not been biased as I have told the truth. And the reason I haven't been biased is because I haven't been biased as I told the truth. So as you can surmise, the certification basically says, I told the truth and I didn't show any bias in coming up with my value opinion.
Okay.
Both of which are incredibly important if the appraisal is to be credible, and ideally it should be reliable. But if the appraisal is to be credible, our clients, in other words, the public, must be able to understand that we formed our value opinion based on what it says in Standard 1. We communicated it based on what's in Standard 2, and there was no bias in what we did.
Right. Okay. So let's lay the foundation here, Tim. As you often point out on this program and to me personally and in other places, I am sure, USPAP breaks down the appraisal assignment really into two parts. We're talking about Standard 1 and Standard 2. What are the difference between the two standards?
Dustin, Standard 1 is the development standard. In other words, it says if you're going to come up with a credible value conclusion, follow this relatively general outline. And if you look carefully at Standard 1, you basically see that it is an outline, a checklist. USPAP uses the word checklist. It's a checklist of what an appraiser should do, and in some cases should avoid, in order to come up with a credible value opinion. And merely as one example, we have to be very sure of the assignment conditions under which we're going to carry the assignment out. For example, if the client says, listen, don't use any REO sales, don't use any foreclosure sales as part of your value opinion, then at that point, the appraiser's got to say, okay, if there's one REO sale out of the last 100, okay, who cares? It doesn't mean anything. But if REO sales are 60% of the market, then no, that is an assignment condition that I cannot accept.
Okay.
And the scope of work rule specifically says, hey, appraiser, if the client tries to limit what it is you're going to do, in other words, tries to limit your credibility, then you've either got to get the assignment conditions changed or you got to walk away from the assignment.
Okay, so if a client comes to me and says, I want you to value this property, but I don't want you to use any of the 10 sales that are in the neighborhood for the last year, even though they're very similar to the subject. What you're saying is that we can't allow the client to dictate how we appraise a property.
Right. The client isn't signing the appraisal report. We are.
Okay.
And as we get more deeply into Standard 2, one of the certification statements says that all the stuff in the appraisal, all the conclusions, the opinions, so on and so forth, are mine. And I developed them. I didn't depend on anybody else. I didn't depend on any rules of thumb. I didn't stand up in my cubicle and shout, hey, what's a fireplace adjustment?
Okay.
It's my opinion of value. And it was formed fairly. It was formed according to Standard 1, and it is therefore credible.
Okay. So what you're saying is Standard 1 in USPAP basically covers the development of the value opinion.
Yes.
Standard 2 is the actual reporting of either orally or written, and then within that, so we're even a subset of that. We're talking today specifically about Standard Rule 2-3, the certification.
Exactly. And obviously, appraisers can make oral reports, but since that happens relatively rarely, we're going to be talking mostly about written reports.
Okay.
And basically, Standard 2 says when you type your report up, when you hand that report to the client, there should be nothing in there which misleads the client. Now, the perspicacious appraiser says, Tim, that's great. What does mislead mean? Because USPAP does not define mislead. All right, my definition, and it's mine, period, and nobody has to believe in it, it's just mine. My definition of mislead is you take the client to a place where the facts and evidence otherwise would not lead, or you fail to take the client to the place where the facts and the evidence do lead.
Okay. I like that definition a lot. Let me tell you a true story as we set this up, Tim. You and I both do consulting with appraisers individually, privately. I had an opportunity to, and I'm not going to reveal any confidences here. This is just going to be a very generic story. in case anybody's getting worried. But I had an opportunity to consult with an individual just in the last week and a half. And as we started talking, realized that he may be in a bit of trouble with his state board. And as we started talking through his report, I said, well, tell me what is in your certification page regarding this specific issue that we were talking about. And I kid you not, Tim, he said, what certification page?
Dustin, the Fannie Mae certification page contains more or less, well, it contains everything that's in USPAP. It contains even more. The point is, as you indicated, this particular appraiser, for whatever reason, has chosen not to read the certification page, but yet every time the appraiser signs that page, and the appraiser must, because there must be a certification in each and every report, the appraiser is saying all of the above stuff is true, and I did what I was supposed to do, and I didn't do what I wasn't supposed to do.
Okay.
And in fact, if you read data from various states, the states will flat tell you, the state appraisal boards will flat tell you that it is unfortunately all too common for appraisal reports not to contain a certification, even though that is pretty much carved in stone that you have to. And to fail to include a certification page is an egregious USPAP violation, and a state or a court will jump all over that.
Okay. All right. And we're talking about a signed certification page as well, right?
The certification page must be signed. Now, do you have to pull out a pen and put a wet signature on it? No, you can put an electronic signature on it. That's not a problem. The point is, you sign the certification page. And when I say you, I don't mean you, Dustin. I mean rhetorically. You sign the certification page to acknowledge, number one, that you followed USPAP in developing and reporting your value conclusion. And number two, and this is the more important of the two, that you accept the responsibilities USPAP puts on you relative to a credible appraisal. So it says, yes, I did this. I'm proud of it. It's my work. And you have every right to find it credible and rely on it.
I'm going to ask you to make a prediction or make a guess, if you will, Tim, on how many appraisers on a, let's say, annual basis actually read through the certification that they put in every report.
Well, I think I spoke with her once recently. Now, Dustin, you read it once, it really doesn't change. But the problem with reading it once is that you don't get the nuances in there. For example, we talk. You and I have spoken before about bias, and you think, oh yes, I got nothing against the parties to the transaction or the property itself or whatever. Well, yeah, okay, that's all true. But the point is, appraisers can also evidence bias by, for example, in stagnant markets, going to the top end of the value range to make the client happy. That's a bias.
Yep.
And USPAP gets all charged up about that, and state appraisal boards get when they read that in your reports, that catches their attention.
Yeah.
And that's not the kind of attention you want to catch.
Okay. So our goal here today is to go through some of these certifications. I'm just going to start reading. Stop me when when we need to talk.
Okay.
Quote, I certify that, to the best of my knowledge and belief, the statements of fact contained in this report are true and correct. Why two? I mean, isn't that a synonym, true and correct?
Yeah, and in some cases they are. But see, we have to look at it as analysts, because that's all we are. We analyze the market and report back to our client. Now, I'm going to give an example with which you're already familiar and which I've used in some of my classes. And this is a great way to get a whole lot of people really upset. Especially if they're brokers, and especially if they're brokers in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the house is paid off. Mr. and Mrs. Seller sell a house for $100,000. And it sold for $100,000 because that's what it says on the deed. Okay, lovely. Now, however, what Mr. and Mrs. Seller did was they elected, their free will, they elected to take back a 100% mortgage at 1% interest, payable interest only monthly for 98 years. Now you say, Tim, that would never happen in real life. And the answer to that is, you're right. It would never happen in real But the point here is to illustrate the situation of something being true but not being correct. It's not meant to be a real world example. Nobody's that stupid, we hope. All right. So the point is, if you do the cash equivalent calculations and you include a 98-year holding period, which is stupid. Nobody holds a mortgage for 98 years. The point is that 100% mortgage at 1% interest payable, interest only, monthly over 98 years, has a cash equivalency of about $20,000. Now, see, here's the point. Yes, the purchase price was $100,000.
That's true.
The market value was only $20,000 because that's all an investor would pay in order to buy that paper under those terms.
And that part is correct.
Yes.
So that's the difference between true and correct.
That's the difference between true and correct. Now, again, you get a lot of brokers in the audience, and that's going to really get a lot of folks bent out of shape. And then somebody's going to say, well, nobody's going to keep it for 98 years. And if you sold the paper and if you sold the property in 7 years, you'd pay it off and it'd be worth a whole lot more. Yeah, that's true without question. But I use the holding period of 98 years to make it clear that there was a difference between the price, $100,000, and the value of $20,000, rather than, hold it for 5 years and make it 100 versus 95, and somebody would go, okay, 5%, who cares? So it's a silly example, but it's meant to illustrate the point.
Yeah, it's the reason they have both the word true and the word correct in there. Love it.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
Next one. The reported analyses, opinions, and conclusions are limited only by the reported assumptions and limiting conditions, and are my personal, impartial, and unbiased professional analyses, opinions, and conclusions. Wow, that's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. Can't read that in one breath. All right, here's the point. The first one, look at the first part of the sentence, and it says the reported assumptions and limiting conditions. All right, there can't be any hidden assumptions. Okay, they have to be straightforward. Now, you can have an assumption, you can have an extraordinary assumption. Okay. Well, that's not the point. The point is the appraiser has got to disclose them so that the client can understand the conditions under which the appraiser made a decision. Okay. In other words, you can be standing in a snowstorm and say, if we were sitting in the Sahara Desert right now, it wouldn't be snowing. Well, that's an extraordinary assumption. Okay. And you're right, it wouldn't be. Right. But that's a condition of the statement. Well, again, that's stupid for illustration purposes. But if you say, look, I tried to check out the electrical system, but the power was off, so I couldn't. Therefore, my value opinion of $350,000 is subject to the extraordinary assumption that the power system really works.
Right.
But you don't know that because the power wasn't turned on.
Gotcha.
Then the second part says, and these reported opinions, blah, 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 are my personal, impartial, and unbiased professional opinions. Now, personal, in other words, you didn't get them from somebody else. You didn't pick up the phone and say, hey, you just did an appraisal in the same neighborhood. How much did you adjust for age?
Okay.
Oh, 14%. Okay, thanks. 14%. Okay, that's not your personal conclusion. That's somebody else's. Then it says impartial. Well, if you go back to the USPAP's definition of what an appraiser is competent, and then an appraiser is impartial, independent, and objective. So the use of the word impartial comes right from USPAP's definition of an appraiser. And then it says unbiased. And by unbiased means there's no bias. USPAP defines bias as slanting your opinion to favor somebody, including yourself.
Right.
And then it says professional analyses, which goes back to competency, because quite frankly, as someone who does consult with a lot of appraisers and someone who has read numerous court cases and state appraisal board decisions, there are a whole lot of appraisers out there who would have to scratch out the word professional and put blazing amateur.
We won't talk about where I stand on that. Okay, let's move on.
I'm glad I can bring a smile to your lips.
The certification says, quote, has no or the specified present or prospective interest and property that is the subject of this report, and no or the specified personal interest with respect to the parties involved. I think this is interesting because when I read these certifications, sometimes I go, I didn't realize that was in there. In other words, if someone were to ask me, could you have an interest in the property that you're appraising? The answer I would give them is no. But actually, USPAP gives you the opportunity to specify that you do have an interest.
Right. USPAP says you can appraise your own property or a property in which you have an interest, so long as you disclose it. Now, should you? No. Can you? Yes, under USPAP, assuming proper disclosure. That also assumes you're unbiased when you come to appraising a property in which you have a personal interest. I remember a number of years ago, an appraiser getting in trouble because his wife's family had an interest in an apartment complex that he appraised. He disclosed it. The client was fine with it. The state of Florida got involved and eventually said, no, there's not a problem because it's properly disclosed. But it was the proper disclosure that saved him. Had he not disclosed it, there would have been some ramifications. But because he disclosed it properly and because there was no other obvious bias, the state took it no further.
Right. Now that makes sense. I think that certification makes sense for sure. So, okay, the next one. I have performed no, or in parentheses, or the specified services as an appraiser or in any other capacity regarding the property that is the subject of this report within 3-year period immediately preceding an acceptance of this assignment. Why is this one in here, Tim?
A lot of appraisers will appraise the same property over their lifetimes, their professional lifetimes, for various reasons. Mostly because they know the property.
Right.
Now, what USPAP is saying is we've got to be transparent. We've got to make sure that there's no bias by having appraised property before and disclosing that, or in other words, it says as an appraiser or any other capacity. What you're disclosing is the capacity in which you have served the property as an appraiser, as a leasing agent, as a broker, as a landscaping contractor, whatever. USPAP is merely trying to make it clear to the appraiser that there can be no bias. This is not something you can hide. You need to disclose this. It could be an assignment condition that you have to disclose. So therefore, if you have done anything to the property other than drive past it a few times, if you have served it in any way, then you have to disclose that. Now, you don't have to disclose any details. You don't have to disclose what it is you did. If you appraised it before, you don't have to disclose anything about your value opinion. You just merely have to say, 2.5 years ago, I appraised this property for the previous owner, period. Next sentence.
Okay. So is it important to put a date in there, or at least a time period? Okay.
Just it says within the 3-year period immediately preceding acceptance of this assignment. So in my opinion, all you'd have to say is 2.5 years ago, I appraised this property for the previous owner.
Okay. Anything wrong with putting a date in there? I know some clients have requested that of us.
Yeah, I don't think so. I have not read anything in USPAP or any of the Q&As that would say indicating a specific date was a problem, so long as it didn't give up anything confidential.
Okay. Let me ask you one more thing, and then we'll move on to a different one. I have started in my report simply because technology is what it is, and certainly we always do a search to find out whether or not we've appraised the property. But the honest truth is I appraise a lot of properties, and sometimes, maybe it was a drive-by, maybe it was something else, and maybe it was a desktop, maybe it was something that I didn't. In other words, if I went back out and did a full inspection, I wouldn't possibly recognize 2.5 years ago that I did something on the property, and we might miss it. Hopefully we won't, because the records are fairly good. I think we have things pop up all the time that say, oh yeah, ding, 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 you have appraised this property in the last 3 years, and then we would disclose. But one thing I've started adding to this certification, I just want to make sure that this sounds okay to you, Tim. I lean on you as the expert, is I do say, according to my records, and then I give the certification.
That's kind of like walking into Caesar's Palace, walking up to a floor manager and say, hello, I'm going to gamble and I'm going to cheat. that won't save you.
Okay.
Two very large men, very polite men, but very large men will come and rather unceremoniously escort you out to Las Vegas Boulevard South with the very clear instructions never to darken their doorway again.
Okay. All right. So maybe it won't save me, but does it give me at least one more layer? I'm not saying it's foolproof, but here's my concern, Tim. If I didn't set this up properly, let me set it up now. Let's say that I've done a previous report that, I'm getting old. I can hide my own Easter eggs at this point. Sometimes I forget, And let's say that we did a search and it didn't come up for whatever reason. And I now disclose that I did not perform any thing in the last 3 years. And then the next thing I know, I get the state board saying, really? Or Fannie Mae saying, really? I've got a report right here that you did 2.5 years ago. Well, the bottom line is I wasn't trying to get away with anything. It didn't come up in my search. I'm trying to cover myself for technical issues.
Dustin, a number of years ago, my younger son wrecked my car. And quite frankly, I was really happy because I hated that car. But he was okay, no problem. Anyway, I got home. He explained what was going on. And with many tears, he said, Dad, I didn't mean to wreck the car. And I said, Jason, I know you didn't, but the results are the same, aren't they?
All right.
So, Dustin, you can say, well, yes, my records, as complete as they are, and I can hide my own Easter eggs, show that I hadn't appraised this property in the past, but if they're within the last 3 years. But if you had, remember, Dustin, the very first certification we read, everything in this appraisal report's true and correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Oops.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The car's still wrecked. Got it.
Yeah,
All right. I have no bias with respect to the property at its subject or to the parties involved. I think we already talked about this, right? The bias end. Okay. Let's move on. My engagement in this assignment was not contingent upon developing or reporting predetermined results. This seems pretty obvious.
It's obvious that that's not there's nothing hidden.
I've told the story before, so I'll just for brevity's sake, just say I had a realtor walk into my office one day, throw a $50 gift card on my desk, and say, "I hope that everything will work out with this appraisal." Let's just say he didn't make it to the hallway before he got his gift card back, and the assignment was turned down.
Yeah, well, that's what it's got to be. And again, this is obvious, but it needs to be said that we need to certify to this so that it's clear that our engagement to appraise a property is not contingent on anything other than, the obvious stuff like, well, it's contingent on the sun coming up in the morning and the banking system still working and the North Koreans not attacking, but which might be a problem in Hawaii. But what we're being honest, we are being transparent. We are certifying that, and this relates to the certifications above this one, no bias, and they're my personal opinions. I developed them, and I'm responsible for them.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I want to pause here, of course, and talk about our sponsors, but I want to finish, Tim. We've got several other certifications that I think are important to go through. I think this is an important experiment on making sure that we understand what it is that we do on a regular basis. And what is it that you do on a regular basis, appraisers? Are you a business owner? Are you a technician? Are you a data entry clerk? I hope that you are not the third. I hope that you are either hiring that out or you're using a great program called DataMaster. DataMaster, of course, is the opportunity to download directly into your report. Now, you still need to verify it. We've been talking about being true and correct here today. You still need to verify it. But, man, I'm telling you, the time savings is incredible when you use DataMaster. And, of course, they are rolling out DataMaster 6, which we've talked about recently on this program that will be rolled out throughout 2018. Check them out if you've not already. Go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. DataMasterFreeTrial.com/coach will allow you to try DataMaster for 14 days free, unlimited downloads. You will be hooked. You will be convinced. Trust me. DataMasterFreeTrial.com/coach. We've been talking a little bit about our software today and technology. And I'll tell you, the best technology out there for appraisal software is, of course, Alamode. They've been in business over 3 decades. I've been using them over 20 years to help me to work smarter, not harder. And I know that's just a cliche, but I'm telling you, every day I'm grateful for what Alamode does for me. The time savings and the increased quality because of all of the tools that are built right into the system. It's Alamode. You can go to alamode.com to learn more, or you can call them, pick up the phone. They're very friendly. They are very knowledgeable about their product. They'll tell you the difference between what they can do and what you are currently using. Call them at 800-ALAMODE. Finally, we are sponsored by Working RE Magazine. Just this morning, I got an email when I woke up, and it was from Working RE Magazine. I clicked on the title, and I thought, that's interesting. And I clicked on the link, and I read the article, and I learned something. That's what opportunities you have when you are signed up for their free email. Just go to workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. And I know you're saying, well, Dustin, I don't want a bunch of spam. I don't want a bunch of advertisements. Okay, then don't click on them. Working RE, they've got to pay their bills as well. And once in a while, you're going to get an advertisement from somebody who's trying to sell you something. And you know what? It might be something you're interested in. If you're not, hit delete. But I'm telling you, every single week I learn something because I pay attention to my email and workingre.com. Again, go to www.workingre.com for more information. And we're back talking with Tim Andersen, a USPAP instructor out of Florida, warm Florida. And we're talking about the certification that we should be putting in each and every appraisal report, specifically talking about written reports. Let's just briefly, an aside, because you said we're going to focus on written reports. With an oral report, we still have to have a written certification sent. Is that correct?
No, Dustin, what you do is with an oral report, you put a signed certification in the work file.
Oh, the work file. Gotcha.
And then a memo that says, I had to put this in the work file because the client, I phoned the client, told the client what was going on. Client said, thank you, I don't need the report.
Perfect. Okay.
And off everybody goes.
We don't have to do what the credit card companies do and read the disclosure.
No, we don't have to.
All right. Okay. So the next one, my compensation. We started to talk a little bit about this because it's similar to the one we talked about before with the realtor that threw the gift card on my desk. The next one is my compensation for completing this assignment is not contingent on the development and reporting of a predetermined value or direction in value. Okay, that's key. That favors the cause of the client, the amount of the value opinion, the attainment of the stipulated results, or the occurrence of the subsequent event directly related to the intended use of the appraisal. In other words, we can't have a predetermined value. We can't someone can't say, hey, I'll give you $50 more in a gift card if you make this deal work.
Basically, yeah. We've got to avoid advocacy because we're not advocates. Okay. Advocates are not impartial, objective, and independent. We must be. So as a result, when the client says, this is an appraisal for an estate, keep it low because I don't want to pay taxes. Mm-hmm. Well, at that point, we either say, hey, it's going to come in where it's going to come in, or we say, no, thank you, I don't want the job. We are not advocates.
Okay. So, and we can talk all day about this, but pre-fallout, pre-2008, we often received engagement letters that had a quote-unquote borrower's estimate of value. We all know what happened with those things. So that mostly has gone away, I think. But some people would argue that knowing the sales price of the purchase that we're doing the appraisal for is an advocacy. What are your thoughts on that?
Dustin, I don't think it's an advocacy. I think it's just another bit of information you have about the subject property. Just because the buyer and the seller agree that it's worth $350,000 doesn't mean its market value is $350,000. The problem is way too many appraisals just assume, $350, okay, that's where everybody's happy. That's where I'll come in. And that is a form of advocacy. And I'm not going to get on my soapbox right now about that.
Oh, come on. I love your soapbox.
But there are university level studies out there going back to and you and I have talked about this, going back to the 60s, indicating that an inordinately humongous percentage of appraisals tend to come into the contract price.
Yeah, 90% sticks in my head.
Yeah, and that's just not I'm trying not to be judgmental. That's just not probable.
Okay. All right. Next one, my analyses, opinion, and conclusions were developed in this report that in this report have been prepared in conformity with the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. I mean, aren't we kind of just restating the obvious there, or that's kind of
well, this one is basically the dagger through the appraiser's heart.
Right. In other words,
if you, for example, Standard Rule 1-4 says the appraiser will collect, verify, and analyze all the data necessary for credible assignment results. And the other side in a court case or your state appraisal board can find that you didn't analyze all of the data. Then basically the next question out of the attorney's mouth is going to be, okay, what other times have you lied?
Yeah. So exactly. And in other words, not only are you violating USPAP, but you're also certifying that you didn't violate USPAP, which is kind of a double whammy.
Yes, it is. And state boards very commonly will list a bunch of charges and then they'll add one more, and a violation of Standard Rule 2-3, meaning specifically this one. Now, it's been my experience that they're usually willing to negotiate that away.
Okay.
But they don't have to. And if you did not follow USPAP, but yet you certified you did, that by definition is misleading. And that's another charge they can bring against you.
Okay. All right. And it's not a get out of jail free card to say, as far as I'm concerned. I'm kidding.
No. Well, of course, your state appraisal board can't send you to jail.
That's true.
But if the state appraisal board thinks you've engaged in fraud, it can march that file down the hall of the state's attorney's office to see if the state's attorney's office wants to bring criminal charges.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. The last two I'm just going to combine because I think they're similar. They're related. I have or have not made a personal inspection of the property that is the subject of this report, and no one provided significant real property assistance to the person signing this certification unless I otherwise indicated.
Right. Okay, the first one, I have or have not made a personal inspection of the property. That's always been there. That's not new. USPAP does not require real property appraisers to inspect the property. It does, however, require the appraiser to disclose if they didn't. You don't even have to say why. You just have to say, I didn't inspect the property. Okay, fine. Now, is that going to call into question the credibility of your analytics, of your conclusions? Possibly. But that if the appraiser chooses not to make an inspection, then the appraiser also chooses to live with that potentiality. Mm-hmm. Then the next one, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, this is kind of where scope of work really gets important, that we make it very clear what our scope of work was, because, again, this goes back to credibility, and possibly, depending on the scope of work, an inspection may be necessary.
Right. The client may say, Dustin, you really don't have to inspect this property. And then you can say, no, I'm going to inspect it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if the client says, well, we really don't want you to inspect it, then at that point, you've got to say, okay, am I going to accept this assignment? Am I going to work to get the assignment conditions changed? Or am I going to thank them profusely and walk away?
Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, when we do have significant appraisal assistance, we do what with it, Tim?
Okay, this is a big one. First of all, nobody has ever defined significant real property appraisal assistance. FAQ 255 addresses this issue, but then it raises the issue of non-appraisers.
Yes, it gets even more confusing, doesn't it?
Okay, now, for example, here in Florida, a non-appraiser can do all sorts of things, but the non-appraiser cannot sign the report anywhere.
Right.
Now, that raises the issue, well, do I have to list the non-appraisers having provided significant appraisal assistance? Well, according to USPAP, according to one part of USPAP, the answer is no, because USPAP applies solely to appraisers, and a non-appraiser is not covered by USPAP. Therefore, you don't need to disclose that. Whereas other appraisers are saying, no, I feel I must be completely transparent, and if a non-appraiser helps me, I'm going to disclose the assistance the non-appraiser provided. But, okay, I really don't think that's a problem. And then the person, the non-appraiser providing the assistance, is not going to sign the certification because only an appraiser can do that. Therefore, the non-appraiser is not responsible for anything in the appraisal or the report. And you and I had spoken about, well, what if you called me up and said, Tim, I want you to do a rental survey for me and get on various sources of rental data, do the survey, and email it to me. Okay. Now, I'm not an appraiser in Idaho.
But you are.
So therefore, I'm an appraiser, but I'm not an appraiser in Idaho. So the USPAP does not look at state law per se, but because I'm not an appraiser in Idaho, would you have to disclose my assistance? And that's a question that the Appraisal Foundation has not yet answered. Now, my advice would be, disclose it.
Right.
Because
better safe than sorry, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Disclose it because the person is an appraiser, just not in the state in which the appraisal took place. Now, would I sign the report? No, because I'm not an appraiser in Idaho. So, okay, I give you the data, you use it. Now, you're responsible for my work. Now, can you sue me if I did something wrong? Well, that's a totally separate issue.
Right.
But from a standpoint of if you accept my work and you put it in your report and you sign the certification, as far as the state's concerned, as far as Fannie Mae is concerned, it's yours. I'm just some, slubby guy by the side of the road. You're the man. They're going to look to you, not to me.
Sticky issues, Tim. Sticky issues.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if nothing else, I've learned a great lesson here, and I hope that my listeners have as well. If we have not recently read through the certifications that we're putting in each and every report, we need to.
Most definitely.
All right, my friend. Thank you for being on. I appreciate it.
Dustin, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. And again, my best to your family.
Oh, thank you. And to yours as well. And the pleasure is always mine. Again, we've been talking with Tim Andersen, who's a USPAP instructor and a consultant out of Florida. If you find yourself on the wrong side of a state board investigation, he's a great guy to call. Tim, I want to unmute you here for a second because I want to have you share with the listeners how they can get a hold of you if they would like your advice on some issues they might be dealing with.
Dustin, my phone number is area code 561-635-5265. My email address is maitca@bellsouth.net, or you can Google Timothy C. Andersen, appraiser, and those will show up somewhere.
And just to be sure, it's Andersen with an S-E-N.
S-E-N, yes. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Super. Well, thank you, Tim. Again, Tim will be joining us on the 26th of February for the second part of a webinar on desktop appraisals, alternative valuations, hybrids. Our first part will be aired on February 19th with Mr. Ernie Durbin of Clarosity, individual that knows a lot about these types of products. The questions that we are going to try to answer are, what are these? Where are we going with these? Do they need to be or should they be a part of an appraiser's business portfolio? If they decide to make this a part of their portfolio, can you make money with these? And most importantly, how to remain USPAP compliant as you complete any type of appraisal report. And Tim will help us with that side of things. Again, if you want to be involved in that, go to my website, theappraisercoach.com, and click on the webinar right there in the shop, in the products. And at checkout, please use 10-OFF. Again, it's the number 10-OFF, 10-OFF to get 10% off. We will see you then and catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
Not this again. Okay. If I do this, that is so weird. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it's the volume. Let's try that.